We have two things in common and one thing not. We're both in recovery, God bless. We both get to work in helping other people acquire recovery. But the thing that you have that I don't is you're cool. So, so tell me a little bit about your story of how you got sober and how that played out.
That played out with me looking around one day and realizing that everyone was gone and I was isolated and I was disconnected from everybody, and I wanted so bad to feel something. And I can sit here and say, honestly, I loved the way drugs made me feel. I always have. I can still reminisce what that feels like, and so I know that about me. And because I started very young, you know, when you start using drugs, as we know, the prefrontal cortex is not developed. The choices we make are, you know, not the greatest at 13, you know, 12, and that was the moment when I realized how much I loved not feeling. And that's a pretty young age to decide, you know, this is working for me, you know, whatever it was. And for me, I didn't grow up in a family that was too dysfunctional. You know, they did travel at times, but it wasn't abusive. It was more, and it wasn't sort of a genetic thing for me. It feels more environmental. So when I walk into the kitchen and there's, you know, drugs laid out, that's absolutely normal for me. There, you know, I would go to other houses and watch them have dinner and sit down and have dinner, and there'd be a mom and dad that was there, and I thought, whoa, that is so strange. I don't know what that would feel like. So that was my sort of experience and why I did such strong drugs, I think, at a young age. And that just, you know, I never stopped, and I went to college, and I became a musician, and became a school teacher at one point, you know, my thing to fall back on, totally addicted to heroin. You know, it's not nap time, Miss Leah, you know, these type of things. And, you know, and funnily enough, people started seeing me play. And I was getting this attention. People would say, keep playing music, someone will see you. And it absolutely happened for me, you know, but all the while, I couldn't go anywhere without using. I couldn't leave my house. And I would, you know, I never did that like, oh, I'm gonna stop for a few days. I just never did that, you know. So I would hear people say, oh, I kicked this for a while, and then I got back on. But up until I honestly quit, I didn't ever stop. It was always a part of who I was. I was going to be anesthetized, and it was just the way it was going to be. I used to picture myself 60 years old on a porch on heroin, and I was fine with that, totally comfortable with that, you know. And that was, you know, that sort of like deep, like resolution, like I am a drug addict and this is going to be my life, because I didn't know any other way. I didn't know people could be sober. I didn't know that people could have some clarity, you know, or some, you know, sort of authentic experience without drugs, you know. So.
No, I know MusiCares played a role in your recovery.
Absolutely.
And I also, if I have the story straight, you actually went on tour early in recovery.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about?
Absolutely. The most incredible intervention that ever happened was MusiCares for me. I was playing music and I was touring and I was making records and getting record deals until everyone went away and I was disconnected. And I would get these calls and say, you know, they'd say, come and audition for this, and I couldn't do it. I was so isolated and I was so deep in my addiction that those type of things were happening. I would do a tour with different bands and I would know by the end of the tour I was going to have to dry out. See, for me, I didn't know what to do when I came off tour. I didn't have the coping skills. I could perform in front of 80,000 people and be totally fine, and I'd come home and I wouldn't know how to cope and do life on life's terms and not, you know, need that attention or need that support because I was on my own. But out there, I was a different person, you know, and I didn't really know how to separate Leah the bass player, Leah the teacher, Leah just the person in recovery. So I wasn't comfortable in my own skin yet. And MusiCares came along, and they saw that I was extremely addicted and talented at the same time. And they reached out, and it took quite a while. They called, they knew I was in my house, they kept calling, and I'd never experienced anything like that. They didn't want anything from me, they wanted me to get well. I didn't, and of course, with this addict mentality I had, I didn't deserve it, right? And I was, why did I qualify for something this special? I still wasn't, didn't feel deserving that I could have a different type of life until they showed it to me. And they called, and every day they'd call, are you ready? Are you ready? I'd say, no, call me back tomorrow. And they called every day. Wow. For about 2 months. I've just started packing, I'd say, and then finally, I don't know what it was about that one day, and they said, why don't you come down to the office? Must have been high enough to just get in my car and go down there. It was at the Musicians Union on Vine Street, and I thought, what the hell, I'm just going to go down there. And from that point, I was surrounded by so much, it gives me chills just thinking about it, so much love and care from complete strangers. But these were musicians, and these were artists, and these were people that had been on the road that I could relate to. Different people in recovery over the years would say, you might want to try hanging out with some musicians, because we see that you have resistance to hanging out with, going to the traditional 12-step meetings or a support group, because I really didn't, I really didn't want to sign up for that. I was resistant, and and that's what made it happen for me. It was like I could be myself, I could be honest. And I used to hear people say, fake it till you make it, and I didn't want to believe that. I said, I want to be real, and I want to have an authentic experience, and I want to have an honest experience. I don't want to fake this anymore. I want to actually have an experience where I can share my feelings with people, and I can learn how to mark my feelings and know what triggers are and know what relapse means and things like that. And that's what they taught me. They taught me all those things that those life lessons that I had no clue. It was so far removed from me to be, to identify anything that I was feeling, because I was so used to performing and being available for everybody else, and being the helper, and I just, they made it really clear, and they broke it down for me, and they put me in treatment. Dr. Drew was my counselor, and he said, we care for you more than you care about yourself. And that was powerful for me. I had never heard that before. I didn't think, somebody, a complete stranger was going to unconditionally care for me. And they did. And I think I was so ready for a shift in my experience, an internal shift, that at that time I just threw my hands up. Do what you will with me. Complete surrender. Well, this is the thing. The stigma that people have to end their careers because they have addiction, and it's such a normal, common thing to get addicted to something. We all do it. People get addicted to sugar and they quit that, or they get addicted to something else. But when it's alcohol and drugs, and when you have the tolerance that builds and builds, and there's no way to stop doing it without support. For me, you going on tour sober, you have a tour company of 100 people, and I was the one person who was sober. Wow. So the percentage of us that are sober is still very small, and I'll tell you the feeble attempts I had to get sober prior to MusiCares sort of being my safety net was because I didn't tell anybody, and I had that guilt and shame. I wanted to be sober, but I didn't really want everybody to know, because that would be an addict or that would be an alcoholic. It was too much of a stigma for me. So I know how it feels, and I think I see it now, and even on like a movie set, you'll still be the 2 people out of 150 people who are, clean and sober, who have made a change in their life. So it's,
I love how you have taken your own struggles, your own recovery over your struggles, and you put that to use to help other people, and specifically help in the entertainment industry. So that's always, to me, it's one thing just to survive and that's enough.
Yeah.
But to survive and then turn that victory into something that empowers and frees other people,
absolutely,
I think is awesome. So I really want to thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. It feels like the right thing to do. I've never felt like it's, something is so right, to be able to give of myself this way. And I can relate, and I've had these experiences exactly the same, and there's nothing different. I mean, the drugs sort of change over the years, but the feelings are the same, and the experiences are the same, and the tragedy is the same, and it's just, it's so interesting to work with people who want to change so badly and just don't know how, and doing interventions and recovery coaching, consulting. It's really just being able to walk through this with somebody. They get the gifts of recovery. I mean, we were saying before, when I got sober through MusiCares, at 60 days sober, I was offered a world tour, and everyone was fearful that I wouldn't be able to manage it. And I thought, this is the gift. These are the gifts of recovery they talk about. If I'm going to commit myself to this is what I hear are the gifts. They said it would come on a silver platter, and I don't know how else to explain being offered a world tour, with Pink. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I absolutely took the gig, and, graciously. And, again, went to meetings and support groups all over the world, because they're there. I was in Ireland. I've been to meetings in Ireland, and in Tokyo, in Russia. And the feeling is the same. It's just one alcoholic helping another, one addict helping another, and we're everywhere. It's just you have to seek them. And like I said before, out of 100 people, I was the one. But what a wonderful experience to be sober. And now I have friends all over the world, because in every country, everybody else was still sleeping, the crew, the band, and I was awake and walking around these countries and going to people's homes and creating these beautiful relationships, because I was sober, because I was awake, because I was clear. I had some clarity, and I wanted to experience touring on a different level. I had toured already, being the coke dealer and putting the Jameson in my bunk, in the tour bus, and I've done that. So, I mean, this different experience was so powerful. And again, in early recovery, I was able to manage it. And I toured for my first 4 or 5 years of recovery. So
That's amazing.
it was just unbelievable.
You are an amazing model. I love that you say you're the 1 on 2 in any movie set or any band, and I think your own model makes it safe for others, and your own story makes it attractive to be sober. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for coming on today and sharing some of that
My
with us.
pleasure. My pleasure. I hope it's helpful.
It is.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you or a loved one is suffering from addiction or substance abuse issues, you do not have to do it alone. Call Pacific Solstice Behavioral Health now at 949-200-7929.